So this video is going to deal with distribution and how to undistribute something that has already been distributed. I know that sounds complicated, but it's not too hard. We'll take a look at it and see if it presents too much problems. We can work on it later. But for now, these are pretty easy problems, so let's see what we can do. We're going to start by doing a few practices of distribution. This one's pretty easy. You just distribute the 7 to the x and the y. Remember, what's on the outside has to be distributed to everything that's on the inside. Where it might get difficult are problems like number 4, where I'm distributing an n to an x and a y. It doesn't matter that I'm distributing an n. It's just like it's a number. The only difference is there's no value for n, there's no value for x, so the only thing I can do is say n times x plus n times y, and I'm done. It doesn't matter also what order the multiplication is in. Here the 2 is at the back, which is okay. I'm going to distribute the 2 to the 9n and the 2 to the 30. So 2 times 9n is 18n, and 2 times 30 is 60. So that would look like this as I was doing the distribution. 2 times 9n plus 2 times 30. And my end result would look like this expression. And don't get freaked out by the larger ones. It's still pretty easy. I'll do the most difficult. It's the y. I'm going to distribute that to the 8x. I'm going to distribute it to the 5y. I'm going to distribute it to the 6. So y times 8x plus y times 5y plus y times 6. Kind of smushed that, I apologize, but that's okay. Y times 8x is just 8xy. Y times 5y's, if I do a y times a y, that's y squared, and I don't have a number to multiply by 5, so the 5 stays, and the y times the y is a y squared. So y times y is just like 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is the same as 2 squared, so y times y is the same as y squared. And then y times 6 is just 6y. 6 times y. I can't do anything else with that, so I'm just going to call it 6y. So that would be my distribution for that one. So after you finish practicing the rest of these, doing distribution, we'll go into doing something called factoring, which is just undistributing something. Something's been multiplied by both terms, and we need to try to take it out. So I'm going to start at the easiest one, number 9. So on number 9, I have 6a plus 6b. Distribution says a times b plus c is the same as a times b plus a times c. So we're looking for whatever was multiplied by the two terms. So in this case, I have an a and a b, but what was multiplied by them was a 6. They both have a 6. So I'm going to factor it out, and I want it to look like, so this is what I'm starting with. I want it to look like that when I'm done. So what I'm factoring out is a 6. If I divide 6 a's by 6, I get just an a. If I divide 6 b's by 6, I just get a b. So what was distributed was a 6, so the two factors are 6 and a plus b. All I'm doing is dividing out a common number in all of them. So we're looking for the greatest common factor. So here's one with just letters. It'll be pretty easy because they both have the same thing in them, correct? They have an e. So I'm going to factor out an e, and what's left, ea divided by e is a, eb divided by e is b. Now let's work with something where there's letters and numbers that I can factor out. Actually, there aren't any letters and numbers I can factor out. So let's do one that we could just factor out numbers. Let's try one of the harder ones over here. How about this 7a squared plus 7a plus 35? I can definitely factor out a common number among these. They are all divisible by what number? Well, the only thing 7 is divisible by is another 7. So I'm going to factor out a 7. That leaves me with a squared. If I divide this by 7, I'm left with a. And if I divide this with a 7, I'm left with a 5. So the factor of 7a squared plus 7a plus 35 is 7 times a squared plus a plus 35. If you want to check your answer to make sure that it's correct, just redistribute this number. Also check to make sure there's nothing else you can factor out. So try to do the rest of these. On a lot of them, it won't be so obvious. For instance, 5 and 60, well, that should be obvious. 3, 9, and 6, it should be obvious what they're all divisible by. There's not a common letter, so I can't factor out a letter. 2a plus 18, it's really clear what number I have to factor out of that one. Remember, I'm going to divide both terms by the same number. A squared plus 3a, not a number over here, so we assume it's a 1, which means I have to factor out a letter, not a number. And remember, y times y is y squared, so what do you think y squared is? Think about it before you do that problem, a squared plus 3a. And EB, 13b, not a number here, so there's going to be a letter I can factor out. So finally we come to combining like terms. In this problem, what I'm going to do is try to match up everything that has a commonality. In other words, if I look at number 17, they're both m's. I have 8 m's and 3 m's, so I can add those together. On number 18, I have 4 q's, a 9, and another q. So I'm going to circle the common numbers and the sign in front of it. There's not another 9, so I can just write plus 9 at the end. I have 4 q's and another q is 5 q's. So that's how we're going to work. Be careful when you write a 9 and a q. I don't like it when they use those, but there you have it. So be careful when you're doing this to make sure that you don't have multiple things that you can add together. For instance, let's look at this huge one down here. I'm going to use different ways of calling out the different things to make sure that when I'm done, I've added up everything that I can and haven't left anything out. So I'll start with a 2p. I'm going to circle it. I'm going to find any other p that I have in here. That's a q, that's a number. Here's a p. Notice I circle the sign in front of it. I have 2 p's and 3 p's. Well, that's 5 p's. Now I have a q. Notice I use a different way to call out the q. That's not a q, this is a q. So I have 9 q's and 4 q's. That's 13 q's. And finally, I have a 20 and nothing else with it, so since it's a plus, I'll write plus 20. So make sure when you're doing that, when you're doing these type of problems, you're circling like terms, squaring any other like terms that you might have, and then underlining the final term. And make sure you're including the sign with those. Like on the 7, I did not include the sign, so I'm going to go back and circle that sign. On this P, I did not include the sign. So make sure you do that. The reason you want to do that is if there ends up being a negative in here, you want to make sure that you subtract it and not add it. Didn't include the plus, so you got to include that plus in there. 8 P's, 7 P's, that's 15 P's. 5 Q's, 7 Q's, that's 12 Q's. And then I have a 1 and a 24, that's just 25. You notice that all these have pluses, so you don't have to worry about negatives on this paper, but you will when you move on to other things. So be careful with that.